Hi, I'm Jessica Pelkey, and I'm a PAC mentor. I'll be guiding you through this webinar. So, providing support when mobility rules are not regarded. I've broken it down into 5 chapters. The first one is fundamental awareness. What should we consider regarding mobility? The second one is, why is knowing about dementia important? What should we know about dementia and brain failure in order to help us provide support? Chapter 3, what are key elements of risk assessment? What is going on with the risk factors, and what should I be considering, and when should I be intervening? Chapter 4 is about mobility hazards by GEM state. Teepa goes through and says a little bit about mobility in regards to each GEM state. And then we watch Teepa as she provides care and support for a gentleman in an amber state named Stanley. In chapter 5, we get another video, and Teepa says, what's the point of all of this? What is the point of all of this in regards to providing support for mobility? Well, get ready, because we're about to dig in. Here we go.
What I'm going to share is we're really looking at how do we use yourself, us, the human beings around the person, and the environment to promote safety and helping people stay active when they're living with dementia, because traditional strategies don't tend to be the ones that are the most helpful strategies. Although they're the ones that work with other populations, they don't work when people have brain change in many, many ways. So we're going to talk about, first of all, why is it people move? And I really want to throw it out there, and I want people to think a little bit about big picture. And there are three main reasons people will move. And I want you to think, why do people move? So I'll give you a few seconds to consider that. Why is it people move? And then I will show you this picture, which for those of you in the PAC world has meaning. And if you're not from the world of positive approach, it probably doesn't have a lot of meaning. And this picture right here, my finger between this thing, represents the primitive human brain, the very core of your brain. And in that core of that brain, there are two little nodes, things that are well wired into the rest of your brain, and they're designed for survival. So the reason people move is, number one, they're avoiding a threat. They're trying to get away or not approach or get out of the way of a threat. So the primitive brain says, ooh, that's a threat, get away, or take it out. So when you're threatened, you will move because you sense there's a threat. And the options are, first you'll freeze, and then you'll flight, or you might then fight. So that's the first reason people move, is they feel threatened. If one feels threatened, one will move. May not be safe moving, but there's movement. The second reason people move is to get their needs met. I need something, therefore I move to get my needs met. So when I want to meet my needs, when I feel my needs aren't being met, I'm going to move to get my needs met. That's why I move. The third reason people move is because humans are made to seek pleasure. I'm looking for something I like. It's not actually a need, it's just what I like. Or I'm trying to get away from things I don't like. So I either move toward things I like or try to get away from things I don't like. And if I can't see anything I like, I'm going to be in a seeking mode. So people move. And so then we're meeting those, we're trying to avoid threats, we're trying to get our needs met, or we're trying to find things we like. So what I'm going to ask you guys who are present here, what are some of the key mobility problems we face when somebody's living with dementia? What are the issues you're facing? And so I'm going to start with just what are you facing? What are your problems? And I'm going to pause there and I'm going to quit sharing. I'm going to ask the question. What problems do people experience when they're with someone who's living with dementia? What kind of mobility problems are you running across? And then I'm going to help you divide them into an either or categorization. But for right now, you tell me what the main problems are from your perspective. What do you got?
Well, I sometimes people move because, well,
What's the problem
that I run across is they're not aware that they're not as mobile as they used to be, and so they'll get up and move, not understanding that they don't have the capacity to really move, or they'll forget a device and then boom, and, you know, we'll carry on with them. That, you know, like you always say, well, where's your walker? And they might not even realize they even have a walker or had a walker. So they
need a walker. Okay, so yeah, so what happens is their sense of ability, how much they think they can do compared to what they're at this moment in time able to do, isn't matching.
Right.
So they're deciding to do something, but unfortunately the ability to do what they've decided to do no longer matches what they're actually able to do, but they don't know that. So there's truly a loss of ability to recognize, I don't have the skills necessary to do this until it's too late. It's too late by the time they figure out, ooh, this isn't working. And frequently, because their brain isn't able to take in and use new data, there's a repetitious quality to it. So even if I almost fall, if I want to get up again, I'll almost fall again, and I'll almost fall again, because I'm not remembering the previous events. All I remember is I want to get up. Oh yeah, I know how to get up, but what's missing is one of my legs. And that used to be very, very common when we had a lot more amputations due to diabetes. There was a time in this country that there was a term called sausage surgery, where people who were living with diabetes would gradually lose more and more of their legs. First, would cut off their toes, and then they would lose, because what would happen is the diabetes would be getting worse and worse and worse. And as they lost mobility, they would move less and less. And one of the things human beings do when they get around a lot is, how am I going to fill my time? Well, you know what? I'm hungry. Actually, I'm not hungry. I just don't know what to do with myself. So I'm going to take in food, because this movement I still have. I have this one. And this now becomes my comfort movement when I can't get out and do things. So I'm starting to take in comfort foods. I like what tastes good. And what I'm not doing is moving in the same way I did. So what ends up happening is I'm no longer burning calories like I was. I'm not building muscle tissue like I did. And so now I'm gaining adipose tissue. So I'm carrying more weight with less muscle support. And so my ability drops. And I'm missing this leg. I keep forgetting I'm missing, because about somewhere between 50 to 70% of people with diabetes have a phantom limb phenomena. Their brain actually remembers the leg, and their brain thinks the leg is still there. They're still getting feedback from the leg. They think the leg is functional until they go to stand up and move. And that's when it suddenly occurs to people, Now, without dementia, you start to learn that you can't trust that sensation anymore. But when you have dementia, learning that new information, it doesn't sink in. So repetitive issues. So the reason they have problems with mobility is we get frustrated because we went over this. We talked about this. You agreed this was very risky. If I can't hold on to the risk pattern, then I repeat the risk pattern. And care providers find it frustrating. So that's a good one. That's a very common one. I think I need to do something. I want to do something. I'd like to do something. And I don't realize that I can't do the something I used to do with the same quality. So I'm missing things. Who else has a common problem? Something that comes up. What you got, Mary?
Falls.
So tell me about falls.
They become very frequent because they continue to do things that without asking for help. Falls, particularly in bathrooms, showers.
Okay, is it the fall that's the problem?
If they get hurt.
Oh, it's the fall related injury. So it's not that you fell, it's that when you fell, you weren't able to protect yourself. So one of the things about falling with humans who don't have dementia is we have strategies. Even on the way down, we'll have strategies. And even on the way down, we'll use options to try to keep ourselves from getting badly hurt. And most of those strategies do not involve a thinking brain. They involve primitive reflexes that have been built over centuries to keep human beings so their heads don't get whacked and their big joints don't get hurt. So what we do, throw your arms out. Everybody practice throwing your arms out. When you start to go down, you automatically do a motion that blocks your trunk or your head from hitting things, and it's called a protective extension reaction. And it's a very primitive reaction. We see it first develop in infants when they start to sit up. And when you lay them on their belly, they'll push up onto their forearms so they prop their head up against gravity. And it has to do with the wiring between the inner ear, the eyes, and the upper trunk. And so it's really very primitive. And it means if you start to go forward, you'll throw your hands out to block yourself from hitting your face. As you mature a little further, you'll start to throw that hand out to the side so that when you're sitting, if you want to reach out, you automatically put your hand down so that you can reach to that side without toppling over. Then you get really good with your trunk, and you have to practice with your trunk. And so in sitting, you start using two hands to do something, but then you'll drop something, but you'll sometimes leave it in your hand, but you'll put your hand down the block. And then finally, we have, ta-da, now I'm working on my feet and how to go from sit to stand and how to stand. And what is this? Anybody know what this one is with toddlers? What's this called? Anybody remember from your developmental classwork? It's called high guard gait. So when kids first learn to walk, their hands are up really high. And there's a purpose to that, because if my hands are high, it gives me a little more this, but it also, at any moment, if I start to topple over, I'll either pull forward in full extension or I'll put my hands out, and it keeps me from whacking up around here. And when I'm really young and learning to move around, I'm so well padded. I am super padded, and my legs are super short compared to my trunk, so that I can make all kinds of mistakes and not get injured. The challenge is with dementia, we have an old body, and we have brain failure, not brain development. So what you'll start noticing is when I walk, I'm doing more of this motion, which signals the core of me is no longer using this motion to protect me. So how many caregivers do you think know that and realize that and recognize that visually as a cue? If this person falls, they can't catch themselves. If this person starts to go, their head is very high risk and their hips are very high risk. how many caregivers plan for that whenever they're engaging with people? And so what they keep doing is, you need to ask for help. And it's like, yeah, would you ask a toddler to ask you for help when they want to get up? Then why are you reprimanding someone who's simply doing what's coming into their mind to do, instead of acknowledging, they're going to get up and try to do something and they don't have a lot of skills, so I better be Johnny on the spot. I need to be the other half of the brain. I need the part that's missing. Okay, what other mobility issues do people have? And let me switch it up, say, what are immobility issues people have? Because I think that's the other side of the coin. What are some things people are thinking about? What's immobility issues? What are some problems there?
It's like the signals don't get to their muscles as good anymore.
Yeah. So they're slow. They're very slow. So the signal that should go down to my feet to get my foot to step forward so that I can catch myself when I catch the front part of my foot on something. So I step out and step forward and block that fall, that protective extension in my feet. I can't get my hold and I catch. I stumble and I go plant. But I also can't get my brain to remember what's the first step of standing up. I sort of, shoot, what is that? And I don't remember the first step of standing up is you have to get your trunk dynamic. If you don't wake your trunk up, then you're going to get up curled over like this, and you're trying to move your whole body up rather than I'm going to get dynamic, so that all I have to use are my hip and leg muscles, not trying to haul my whole trunk up. And it just means nobody really helped me do the piece, sit tall. Because as soon as, if I say the words, okay, everybody sit tall, sit tall. As soon as you sit tall, what ends up happening is you go into extension in your trunk. Once I extend my trunk and then I say lean forward, the weight will shift to your feet instead of staying in your bottom. Who has to be able to cue through the task and know the sequence of the task if that's going to work? And it's not the person living with dementia. If they could do it, we wouldn't be here. Their brain would be telling them how to do it. So what we're missing is that their brain doesn't know the sequence. It no longer knows the sequence that's going to help them stand up. So yelling from across the room, sit down, whoa, 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 John. All it sounds like is I don't like you. There's not really a message there that's helpful. So reframing doing, okay? So I'll go back and ask my question. So what are the main issues? And I'm going to break it down into two categories. Number one, people don't move enough. Number two, people move too much. So two categories, people and not safe. So those are the two sides of the coin. And frequently what people try, and you guys could speak to what you've tried, we try strategies that work with people who don't have dementia. We keep trying strategies effective for people who do not have brain change. We use things that we have used historically for people who broke a hip, for people who did this, for people who do that. We do things that are based on mature adults being able to take in new data, use new equipment, make a change in the environment, modify the task, modify this, and use the modification. And it doesn't work. So the reason it doesn't work is we keep people living with dementia and not have dementia. And I have yet to figure out how we think that's going to happen, but it's just really hard for us to let go of the idea that they can't. So here's why we want to focus on mobility, even though they can't do it the way we want them to. We know that mobility is a building block for every self-care activity you do. If you don't move, you can't do care for yourself. And what you can't do, you care for yourself, all of a sudden talk about man, talk about time use, talk about frustration of the care partners. When I can't do things for myself safely, that's when the money starts adding up. That's when the time starts adding up. That's when my attention on you starts adding up to where I'm frustrated, because it's like I can't watch her 24/7. It's like, you're absolutely right, you can't. And that's when we start thinking, well, assistive devices, like I'll use an alarm. Classically, at this point in time, what we know for people living with dementia is all the alarm does is increase the probability someone has fallen. Or you irritate the crap out of other people around that individual, because other people who have less dementia or no dementia will say, sit down, Teepa, 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 your alarm's going off. Sit down, honey. They need you not to get up. That's why that, Teepa, honey, don't stand up. Hey, she's sitting up is the most common thing that happens. And so by the time somebody gets there, whether it's a bed alarm or a chair alarm, they're a notification of a fall rather than a prevention of a fall. They're a notification of someone in need, or someone who's not getting what they like, or someone who's feeling threatened. But that's not what we're doing. We're interpreting them as helpful when in fact they are not, as a rule. They have not been shown to be helpful in fall-related injury reduction. They don't reduce the fall-related injuries. What they do cause is more agitation, quote unquote, and more resistance to care. Because what happens is people see them as indicators someone should sit back down or someone needs help, but they don't verify before they move in there and start doing something. And what ends up happening is the person did not realize, quote unquote, a helper was coming, and that causes more issues in mobility. We also know that the less mobile someone is, the more caregiving problems crop up. We know that our behavior affects someone else's behavior. And if I'm getting flustered and frustrated, it actually affects the other person. We know that also we want to focus on mobility because it actually can be changed, but not the way we're doing it. So we have to be willing to make a fist and hold it tight. If we're going to do something, we're going to have to let go of what isn't working and start doing things that are helpful. And that means we've got to quit the behaviors that we've used for ages that have been demonstrated not to help people living with dementia. And we've got to take on some new awareness, knowledge, and skill that can be helpful. So there are things we can do, but we got to let go of what's not working, or it's not going to help. We also know that we need to focus on mobility because there's no safe way to ignore it. Humans move. That's just how we're built. Humans stop moving. That's just what happens with fear or anxiety or distress. People won't move until you're not watching. Because when you watch me, you make me nervous. And so I wait till you're not watching because that makes me less nervous. Doesn't mean I'm more skilled. It just means I move when you're not looking. And that means you get frustrated because as soon as you turn your back, that's when I moved. And it's like, well, duh, what part did you miss? You're the threat. As long as I see you as the threat to my existence, I've got to wait till you're not looking. I'm trying to survive and you're scaring the crap out of me. And that's why I've got to wait till your back is turned. See, every time you turn around, you attack me. And if you don't think, whoa, 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 Teepa, no, is an attack, think again. You see it as responding. It's not, it's reacting to a movement I made, and you're actually telling me I'm in danger, I'm in danger. And when you come rushing at me at that point, I think you're the danger. I don't realize what I did caused you to do that. You just came out of nowhere. You grabbed me, you shoved me back, you yelled at me. So if you don't start recognizing where the challenge is coming from, it's not just the dementia, it's how we're reacting and what we're wanting that we're not getting. We move because we want something and we're trying to eliminate threats. We move because we don't like what people are doing and we'd like them to do something different. So one of us has got to change our approach, and it unfortunately can't be the person living with dementia because they're doing the best they can in that moment. doing what they're doing. So we've got to take a back seat and be curious. So what I would also say is this final piece, when there's problems with mobility, it affects how somebody can be interactive. If I don't get around on my own, I'm now reliant on you for all interactions. So if I'm not able to get out of the bed and come out into the common space, if I'm not able to get on and off the toilet, I now need to interact every time I want to do something. If I don't like the drink I got and I want a different drink, I have to get your attention. And if you're busy, then if I've always done things for myself, here's a heads up. I'm not going to suddenly just sit there and wait for you. I'll just go do it myself. Unfortunately, that's where the problem comes. And the bottom line is people notice whether we're doing a good job or a bad job when people are mobile or immobile. So we get rated on this. This is a big deal. State surveyors, people who are in charge, family members, everybody is watching mobility. And when our mobility changes, people notice. People notice movement and they notice stillness. And so it's a problem because we fuss at each other about it. I don't understand. Why is my mother, what is going on with my husband? Why are you not helping? So this mobility thing is a big challenge for us. So if we're to move on, the simple message that I want to give everybody when people break the rules is people move to meet their needs and people stop moving to meet their needs. Now, that's important to get. People will move to meet their needs. People will stop moving to meet their needs. So what we want to do is balance. If someone is moving, it means either they have an unmet need and they're trying to meet it. If they stop moving, they think they've met their needs. So I've got to figure out how to activate them without making it sound like I need you to stand up. I need you to come with me, because they don't think that. I need you to use your walker. When we make need statements, it means we're in having the problem. When they make need statements, we need to listen better. I need to go home. Well, if I need to go home, you better be ready. I'm going to start moving. I need a drink of water. Teepa, you just had a drink of water. Well, if I knew that, I would be satisfied. So you better be ready. I'm going to go try to get a drink of water because I'm not going to wait for you. Teepa, you need to use your walker. That's me, not you. And if I yell to you, hey, excuse me, I need my walker, that would be a very different situation. So we got to listen to where's the statement of need coming from? Where is the like coming from? Where is the want coming from? Because that's going to tell us people stop moving to meet their needs or they get moving to meet their needs. So they aren't breaking the rules. They're following the very primitive rule of survival. And we keep thinking we're breaking the rules. It's like our rules. They're following the rules they know how to follow. So work with the rules they have. The rules are, I need to move to get my needs met. I need to stop moving to get my needs met. So let's work with what they got. So what should you do? Here's the number one. You need to screen and establish baselines on everybody and then use that baseline to design a program. What we do is we establish baselines and we go, yep, high risk for falls. But then we don't do anything to reduce the risk. We do things that don't work to reduce the risk. We label the person as a high-risk faller. And all that does is alert staff, there's a high-risk faller there. It doesn't tell them what to do, it just labels them as someone who's high risk for falls. So it actually sets us some more up for, John, hang on, wait a minute, because it makes me nervous when you're a high-risk faller. So if I have a baseline, if I don't come up with a plan to do something about that baseline, either to increase your mobility skills or to decrease the time you're sitting or immobile, then I don't know why I bothered to screen for a baseline. If I'm not going to do something with that baseline for you, with you, engaging you, then quit doing the baselines, because all they do is create tension and distress for care providers. And I'm just going to put it out there because we need to quit acting like it's not an issue. If we're screening for it, then use that information to develop something that makes sense for the person. And we should either be going increase mobility, enhance their mobility, or help them reduce their mobility. Get them to sit a little longer, take a break, recharge their batteries. We need to be helping someone depending on what we found on that baseline. We also need to communicate those expectations to direct care staff in a way that give them things to do, not things they shouldn't do. Like, don't leave her alone. When you're with her, encourage her to lean forward, give her step by step, offer her a visual cue. We need to get better at building programs that give staff the tools they need, the activities, the role modeling. We also want to model what we want to see. So we need to be much more active doing something out there than talking about doing something. We need to show folks, and with permission, video people, and then share the video, because that actually shows that next shift, that next group of people. So talk with families about getting permission, videotaping some good interactions of how we're managing this, how this works, what happens when John starts to stand up, what isn't a strategy to use, because you've got it all in one place then, and that's how we start to build staff skill. Let them see somebody doing it and doing it well, rather than, and then show them the other video. What happens when you do this other thing? Because we think people notice things. They don't. They're just on automatic pilot. They're doing what they've always done. People always get walkers after a hip fracture. Why? Well, because they always get walkers. But what if I can show you the evidence that if they get a walker and they are in mid to late stage dementia, what ends up happening is they actually increase the risk of fall-related injuries within 6 months to a year. Then why are we still giving out walkers? The answer is because we've always given out walkers, even though we are very aware that people in mid to late stage can't learn to use the assistive device appropriately, and they use it inappropriately. So in other words, they start leaning forward in the walker, and so they get that third point of contact, but then they forget the walker because it's out of sight, out of mind, and yet they're used to that forward momentum, and so they actually have increased the risk of forward falls. So there's no value in it in the long run. In the short run, maybe, but we haven't got a strategy for taking the walker away. We haven't got a strategy for helping somebody move from needing an assistive device to doing without it. And unfortunately, Medicare has shortened the payment system so much that therapists do not have neither the training nor the time to bring somebody back out of learning to use the assistive device to learning to live without the assistive device. And we should, but we don't, because our society hasn't figured this out yet for dementia. All they know is people plateau and they don't do well. Yes.
Teepa. So I recently, I'm a volunteer usher at a very large theater. I recently witnessed someone sitting on their walker because they had the little bench there to rest on.
Yep.
And her daughter just decided to use it like a wheelchair. And she went up and forced the walker to go over the threshold where you enter one of the corridors to the theater.
Yeah.
The walker collapsed. Mom fell on the floor. Daughter fell on top of her. So all I could think about is they're not educating people around them either.
Nope.
As to the do's and don'ts of
how to use this thing.
What should be done, right. And then when you're talking about Medicare, we've noticed we have a special place where we put people's walkers if they need assistance to get to their seats. And people steal other people's walkers all the time.
Yep.
It's scary to me that that's the world we live in.
Well, I mean, that's our system is, you know, you get your walker and whether you qualify for Medicare or not. And so this becomes a prized possession, but it's actually not safe. And so we have walkers that have been inherited from one person to another, same as wheelchairs. So we, you know, if I can't get you one, then I'll let somebody else use somebody else spouses who used it, but now they're bedbound. They don't need it anymore. So we still have that device. So we'll just transfer it on to somebody else. It's just, we get into systems, and that's pretty much what's going on with mobility issues. Yeah, we also need to really monitor our staff to see whether or not they're doing what we've talked about, or whether we need to help them modify what they're doing, because old habits die hard. We also want to look at our residents. We need to look at those folks, the person that I'm trying to help, to know whether or not they're changing. Because the reality is dementia changes people. So if I had a program that worked before, am I monitoring to see whether it's still working? Is it working morning to night? Is it working day to day? Is it working overtime? Because it turns out for some people, they change dramatically from morning to evening. Some people change from day to day. Some people change over time, but often the mobility plans don't change until there's a fall. It's like, why are we waiting for there to be a fall to change the mobility plan? Well, because that's what triggers us to think about there needs to be a change in mobility plan. And one of the last things I would say is we need to help staff be able to dynamically look at a person each and every time they interact, and to raise their hand and go, this is not what I saw last time. I'm seeing variability. So I think we need a plan that has two levels to it. One when they can and one when they can't.
Jess here. You finished chapter 1. What should we consider regarding mobility? Teepa covered a lot. She talked about helping people do and move, why people do and move, mobility issues and immobility issues. She asked us to put on our detective hats, to be curious and really, really observant about what's really happening here. What's driving the person's mobility or their lack of mobility? What's their awareness of their ability change? Are they aware that they are experiencing changes in their abilities? And we also need to consider what is working and what's not working. What strategies simply aren't effective? Can we let go of them? And instead, can we explore, what might be helpful? What can we do different? And what is working? Because we want to communicate and build on that. We've got to look in the mirror and recognize, are we reacting instinctively or are we responding supportively? Example, what's the language that we're using? I need you to. I want to take you. Let me help you. That's about us. That's really about our needs and wants. Thinking about, how can we shift that? How can we get the person to want what we want? Why should they want what we want? What's it to them? We've got to make it valuable to them. So thinking instead, ooh, you're really good at, could you help me? Options to empower. Any one of these 5 positive action starters. Which one will you try first? See, we've got to work with what the person's got. We've got to establish baselines, and we've got to be skilled at assessing abilities. Not just every so often, but we're really talking about how consistent or variable is the person in their abilities and their strength. Noticing this, mindfully assessing each interaction or transfer. We've really got to communicate our expectations, and not just what we don't want people to do, but we've really got to set people up for what we do want them to do. And we've got to monitor that. So we've got to get really skilled at showing what we want to see. whether it's with a person living with dementia or whether it's with care partners. We've got to become skilled at using gestures and demonstrations and maybe even recordings in order to show people what we want to see. Thank you for sticking it out through chapter 1. You made it through. And now chapter 2.
So now I want to go over briefly, what do people need to know about dementia? And what I would say is, unless you know what this slide means, you're not prepared to be the best mobility enhancer of somebody living with dementia. If you look at this slide, normal, early dementia, late dementia, and an 18-month-old child, and you can explain this slide to me, then you're going to be great at figuring out mobility issues for people living with dementia and how to support them. If you don't know what this slide is, then you're going to be making mistakes when it comes to mobility. But I would say the same thing about these two pictures of the brain. If you don't know what it means to look at these two pictures and realize right here, this chunk right there, all of that brain is related to how you move and how you know how you move. This chunk of brain is related to decisions related to movement. This chunk of brain back here is related to what you notice visually, and then that often will drive you to move in one direction or another or hold still. And so when you look at this healthy brain and then you look at somebody with late stage Alzheimer's, realizing that's 1/3 of the brain still working, 2/3 is broken. So what I want to be aware of, what's still working. What's still working is, at this point, it's taking both sides of my back of my brain, and this up at the top is the back of the brain, the visual cortex. I'm getting this much data from the world around me. And it's only one eye, it's monocular in general, which means I have no depth perception. So when I go to reach for something, I have no idea how far away it is. When I go to move, I don't know whether I'm moving on a flat surface or one that has holes in it. I don't know whether what I'm looking at that point is frequently, I'm seeing so little of it, is it a cup or is it something else? And so without meaning to, I may try to explore it and turn it upside down to figure it out. And what I just did is pour out whatever was in there. Well, that startles me. And then I get up and I start to move. Well, I didn't realize it was slick, that what it was coffee or soda, and I've spilled it all over the floor. And now I'm just getting up and now my foot slides out. I mean, I'm not doing it on purpose, but my visual cortex is limited. My movement and sensation cortex, what you or I can't do is, if we were to break something when we fell, we would be immobile at that point. We would not move, and we would not let anybody else move us, because we would be very aware of where the injury was and what we thought the injury was caused by. And so there is absolutely no way on this earth are you gonna, I'll leave it, don't touch it. I think it's my elbow. It's my elbow. Don't move me. No, I think it's broken. I mean, that's the brain over on the other side. People at this point will get up and maybe even try to move their elbow and go, oh, wow, geez, and then get up and move. Because what they don't realize is what they're feeling is coming from that joint, and that distress they're in, it's broken. But they may not know that. And so one of the things their brain says is, get up and go, get up and go, get out of here, this is dangerous. As they get up, and they continue to do that. And there's no way you or I could do it. Their brain can, because it doesn't have the front part down there at the bottom, which would help them be logical and reasonable and control the assistance and consider alternatives and pick a good option. It's just not going to happen. So they break the rules because there are no rules other than survival. And that's what we have to let go of. This chunk is my ability to hold on to new data that you give me, the ability to use new information. This part is my ability right here. This little chunk is my ability to understand all the words you give me and to give you words back that were actually going to be helpful. And especially when I'm trying to move, this part is not actually all that helpful in most cases for me doing what you want, because the part that we're really working with is I can hear you, I just don't understand what you're saying. And the real problem comes, remember when we were looking on the top, this is that chunk of brain wiring that wires us all together to make doing possible and to make movement smooth and coordinated. And this is what I have left. And what these are great big holes. This is my ability to use language related to movement, and my wiring's gone. Over here, however, is the part that's preserved. And this is where, okay, so we have strength. There's still a little wiring there. It's going to be very much both sides at the same time. Both sides at the same time, unless I figure out how to simplify. So I've got to simplify, not babyfy. And I've got to learn to use the language area that's still active, which will be, they can give me forbidden words. That may be very well an indication of something's not okay or a need. They can also react to my words. They can give me a back and forth. And if I listen for frequency, intensity, or volume, that may tell me whether they're getting their needs met, they're getting their likes met, whether it feels like I'm threatening them. So I'm picking up on my cues. Then if I use music, poetry, prayer, or counting, it can help people move better, because music, poetry, prayer, and counting is still wired in to the movement center. So if I want to use what's going to work, I've got to stand up for Jesus, you soldiers of the cross. Stand up. Now, I sang it once. That's an old hymn, by the way, Christian faith. If you're not of that faith and you don't know that hymn, don't feel bad. It just is Southern Baptist, I believe, but I could be mistaken. And so I went through it once, and then what did I do with my body? I gave it big emphasis, and I stood up, and I give a big hand motion with my hands. And what it can do is prepare someone to stand, get someone to stand, and then we're ready to, now notice the rhythm of it. Do, 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 do. Marching is rather than, John, are you ready to get up? John, I need you to lean forward. John, are you listening to me? John, honey, can you get your feet on the floor? John, I need, John, look at me, John. I need you to stand up. We're going to go down the hall. We're going to get you something to eat. Are you ready to get something to eat? John, honey, John, are you having thoughts about me right now? Happy thoughts. Are you thinking, yes, I can't wait to go down the hall? What did you say we were going to do? So what I did is I annoyed you by using rhythm and frequency and intensity. And all you want to do is get away from me. And yet the reality is, for you to be safe, I need to be with you. So I've got to figure out strategies that make people want to be with us, not move away from us. So this chunk of brain, this is the part, and this is a really important part for us to take a look at. Look at that wiring. That's the front part that allows me to take in whatever you give me, make and come to a reasonable conclusion and control my impulses. It's what allows me to initiate and sequence and know when I'm done and move on to something else. It's what actually allows me to see your point of view and to understand what I'm doing is challenging. And this is what I have left. And notice how much of me there's still there. I mean, I want to be respected. I want to work with you. It's not like I want to cause trouble. I don't. I just don't have any of the wiring that allows me to do anything different. So if that's the case, expecting me to do what I say, Teepa, will you wait? I'm going to go get your walker. Just wait here, okay? If the last thing I see is you moving away from me, you're assuming I took in all that verbal data, and when I said, oh, okay, that I understood what you said, and that what I'm agreeing to do is wait in this chair until you come back. what I saw is you wanted something. You asked me if I would. I said okay because I wanted to please you. You started moving away. So my brain goes, oh, you want me to follow you. And so I start to get up to follow you. And then you say, she does this. She waits till my back is turned. I told her, just wait for me. I want to get you. And what we have is a miscommunication. These two brains are not actually working well together.
Jess again. You finished chapter 2. Why is knowing about dementia important? So when we understand how the brain is changing, we get a better sense of what's going on, why, how it affects things, and how to adapt our support. When we can look at a PET scan and understand what we're seeing, then we can recognize the chemical change that occurs during dementia versus the structural change that we can recognize from looking at the pictures of the brain. We can understand what those changes represent and what they mean. We can also understand the impact of wiring loss, what that means for a person's abilities, and looking at each of the different parts of the brain, we can understand the functional abilities and how those are changing, how that plays into what we're seeing in regards to the person living with dementia. Understanding the progression of dementia also helps us to recognize the sensory changes that are occurring. What's going on visually for the person and their visual field changes, their receptive language abilities, and their expressive language abilities. Also understanding that those are two different abilities. Recognizing sensations, actually being able to do an internal assessment and recognize what sensations are occurring in the body, including the cause and location of pain. How taste and how smell are affected by dementia and what that means. What that means for safety awareness and what that means in terms of what a person may like or not like. When we understand how the brain is changing, we can recognize lost and retained communication abilities because there are some common trends. So what communication is effective generally and what's not effective generally, that can be pretty consistent. Common miscommunication issues and how we can help people to want to be with us. These are things that we can have some control over when we understand how dementia is affecting the brain. So how can we adapt our support? Well, big emphasis on visual cueing. So using signs and pictures, props, gestures, facial expressions, demonstrations. In order to cue the person as to our message. It's also incredibly important for us to recognize what are they seeing or not seeing based on their visual field. Am I offering that thing where they can see it? Or am I more just thinking they can see it, but not recognizing because I haven't tried out myself these visual field changes? Thinking about, if the person has binocular or a monocular visual field and they've come with me to a new location where I'd like them to sit, with that visual field, if they were looking up and out in social vision, Did they actually get a visual of the chair or the bed that's behind them? Am I counting on them recognizing the sensation of the chair or the bed against the back of their legs for them to realize there's something there for them to sit? Vision is the primary way we take in data. So using it in order to enhance communication and also to recognize what are they getting, what are they not getting visually. Now, auditory is a different thing. Understanding dementia doesn't actually affect hearing. It does, however, greatly affect comprehension and whether or not the person is getting the words that we're using. So, keeping it simple, less words, matched to visual cueing. Being mindful of our tones, using low tones, and also appealing rhythm. John? It's Jessica. Hey. Ooh, John? As opposed to some more annoying tendencies that we accidentally have. We've also really got to be evaluating, really observing. Are they comprehending our message? Are they truly comprehending it? Or does it just seem that way? Understanding left and right temporal lobe functions really helps us to know, are they actually getting our message or are we being tricked into thinking they got it? Extensive, this verbal communication piece, receptive and expressive language and how that works. Knowing about these brain changes can help us significantly in getting our message through. And finally, physical cueing. What do we need to know, not just about visual, not just about auditory, but also about touch? And it looks like this for a reason. To emphasize the message, no touching until we've done a visual verbal, unless we're skillfully adapting. We want to make sure that we greet a person before we treat them. And that when we are treating them, we're doing with them rather than to them or for them. Knowing that dementia robs skill before strength is important for how we physically support people. Using hand under hand means that we can support people using our skill while they participate, so that it's a closed circuit. And when we recognize how the brain is changing, we're able to skillfully match and adapt to what remains. Thank you for getting through this chapter. On to the next one.
So here's what we know as a fall risk assessment. Now, most of you on this call probably are familiar with everything but the red zones and the yellow and the green. I'm going to get to that. So here's what we know. This is what we should be checking out to figure out how high your fall risk is. Do you have a history of falls? That is actually the #1 indicator of a faller, is if you've already fallen once. People who've fallen once are twice as likely as people who have never fallen to fall again. So the first fall is a strong indicator that there are going to be more. If you have a secondary diagnosis, any secondary diagnosis, your risk of having falls when you get dementia goes up. If you use ambulatory aids, your risk of falling goes up. Now notice it's not do you use them well, it's do you use them. If you use an ambulatory aid when you have dementia, your risk of falling goes up. If you're getting IV or any other tubing, so in addition to IV, we have added oxygen. We have added anything that tethers you, anything that ties you in some way, because out of sight, out of mind. So catheters, any kind of device that is hooked somewhere will increase your risk of falling, because you don't realize there's a how far you can get thing going on. And when you get to the end of the line, all of a sudden your brain is going, what's that? And if you don't have high skill, you can't recover. Then we ask, do you have an abnormal gait? Do you have a stride that is not routine? Do you have a weight shift that isn't? Do you have inability through your trunk? Any gait abnormality increases your risk of falls. And finally, any in your mental status in addition to your dementia. So if you have things like you have a delirium on top, if you have depression, if you get an anxiety, if you become anxious, those things actually increase your risk score. So they've abbreviated it, just so everybody's familiar, with this thing called FALS. And so it's falls history, fluids is also in there because we know dehydration is a risk factor. Ambulation aids, locomotion, lucidity, and the last S is a secondary diagnosis. So that's what you want to look for. So once you've identified what the risk pattern is, then what you rate them as is high risk for fall-related injuries, medium risk for fall-related injuries, or low risk for fall-related injuries. Guess what it turns out most people have in their care house? Everybody's in the red zone. By the time people are getting assistance, people are in the red zone. This isn't an early, it can be early in the disease if we're talking Lewy body. Of all dementias, Lewy body has the highest risk fall profile by about, estimates were somewhere around 35%. Lewy body is even higher than Parkinson's. It's for sure higher than any other dementia, and it happens in episodes. It happens in patterns. And so what the federal government, what the state governments, what nobody has done is identified Lewy body as a separate category of fall risk, and that we don't want to ding people for taking people with Lewy body in. Because if we do that, what we do is limit who will take somebody with Lewy body, because nobody wants that risk profile. Because essentially you're not going to win that one. Lewy body will have falls. I mean, bottom line, they will have falls, and they will have injuries with falls with great regularity because of the disease they have. And it's punishing someone for providing support to someone who's going to fall. It's like, well, that makes no sense, because that's one of the symptoms of the disease. Why are you making that a punish thing? I mean, that's illogical, but we still have it as a pattern right now. What we don't have is this. What's our high-risk intervention? What we do is create these profiles that are ineffective. We need a high-risk intervention for high-risk fall-related injury. We need a medium risk for medium, and we need low. And what we keep doing is creating things that don't work. We'll have the person use their call bell. We'll remind them to sit for a few seconds so that they're postural hypotension. We'll provide assistance as soon as they do the call bell, we will provide assistance to go to the bathroom. It's just like, has it worked yet? No. We will remind them to use their assistive device. Well, just take those off the table. Those are not systems that work. They can't do it. Our problem is that everybody's at high risk for falls and injury, and our prevention plans don't seem to help, and they're very expensive. These prevention plans that don't work, they waste a lot of resources, and they cost a lot of time, and they aren't meeting the need. So what we know is we need to use technology differently. What we're doing is we're using technology in an ineffective way. So we need to, I'm going to give you one example of what we have found out. If we put a monitor in the bed that indicates someone is starting to move in the bed, so it's a sensor of how much movement the person is exhibiting in the bed. It can be a wrist monitor, it can be an arm monitor, it can be an ankle monitor. It's just a monitor that signals, ooh, we're starting to have a stage of sleep where people are coming out of sleep state into alert state. When that goes off, that's when the helper comes and goes, knock, knock, knock. Good morning, it's Teepa. Or hey, you're waking up. I don't want to disturb someone's sleep cycle when they're in a deep sleep cycle. what I want to do is become alert to their alerting so that I appear at the right moment to help them rouse, go empty their bladder, and come back to bed. What I need to quit doing is interrupting their sleep cycle or having a chair or bed alarm that goes off when their feet hit the floor. If I wait till they're that mobile, it's too late. So it has to be an alarm, and those sensors are out there. That system is available. If I'm going to use an alarm, when they're starting to move in the bed, I need a technology that says, oh, hey, John, Teepa's on her way. Could you wait just a second? She's coming. She's coming. Count with me. She is on her way. Let's count to 10. 1, 2, and what is that buying me as the care provider? What did I do? I voice recorded it. That was specific to John with a counting message that said, oh, Teepa's on her way, giving him the name of somebody who's familiar, giving him a time count that gives me time to be present. So we need to change our use of technology. John's not going to follow the rules. He is not going to use a call bell. He is not going to wait. He is not going to get his, it's not going to happen. So unless we're willing to change, nothing changes. And all we keep doing is recording. I'm trying to, John just gets up. It's like he does. So why don't we change how we're dealing with it? So what if we also had that same technology that turned lights on in the room? Guess what that gives us? A visual awareness that John's awake. So now I don't just have to count on a vibration in my pocket. I could actually see John's lights coming up, and you can put it on a dimmer so it's a low light to mid light to high light that tells me, Teepa, you better get your behind in gear. You need to get down there and you need to not knock because John is getting real close to being ready to rouse up. And this is particularly when somebody's in, and that nighttime thing turns out to be a big deal. A lot of falls are happening in that time period. So we want the person to change. And what I'm saying is we need to change, and we need to get into responsive mode, not reactive mode. We need to have a response pattern. We need to know when John's starting to get up, I want to go, well, hey, John, you're getting up. Not, John, what are you doing? I need you to sit back down. John, honey, don't get up, sweetheart. Where's your walker? That's a reactive. So that needs to pause. That's not working. So how big is the problem? Well, in hospital settings, it turns out this is a huge problem. In long-term care settings, it turns out this is a huge problem. In independent living settings, it turns out this is a huge problem. In assisted living settings, this is a huge problem. In home care settings, it's a huge problem. In special units, it's a huge problem. Well, wonder why. And what I would say is, here's why. I'm going to give you a second to look at this laundry list. There are a huge number of dementia care issues related ultimately to mobility issues. And we don't realize that it's more than falls and injuries. When we talk about mobility things, it's everywhere. I mean, mobility starts to be a problem in all these things, and we get it, but we seem to not quite get it. And because we're missing how often this comes up, we don't see it as the primary thing we need to change. All we keep doing is trying to keep people from falling, but I mean, that's actually only a minor part of the bigger picture of where we're having problems. People are doing a lot of things because of mobility issues. And people's where they can live and how they live is fairly significantly impacted by their mobility abilities. So let's talk about this. So we want to avoid threats, get our needs met, and find pleasure in living. So your 5 human needs, people are either looking for intake or they get the intake giving them. They have energy flow, they're either revved up or they need rest. They have output issues. They're trying to figure out what to do with output, or they have output and it's created a risk factor. They're not comfortable. They're looking for friendly, familiar, functional, and forgiving, or they're looking for the right sensory match, the right social match, the right surface to surface match, or the right space match. And humans seek to be pain-free. Physical pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain. I'll do what I have to try to get pain-free. So if that's what I'm looking for, then staff should be tuned in that when they see an emotion, it's an indicator of unmet need. So if you look at these levels of emotion, when we get to the red zone, that's when I am at the highest risk for significant injury. Medium risk is where I'm at a relatively high risk for injury. And when my amygdala is just at that low risk, that's when we should be intervening. What we end up doing is we wait until people are moving into the yellow zone or red zone before we start intervening, and then people don't want anything to do with us instead of using us as a resource. So we need to get better at noticing things when people are irritated or bothered, when they're dissatisfied or blue, when they seem to be missing someone or something, when they're nervous or anxious, when they're disengaged or they're antsy. If we would notice when people were there, we could respond, not react. When we go into the yellow zone, we're starting to react. When we're in the red zone, we're definitely doing nothing but reacting. And we've waited too long. All we're going to do is try to fix something. But by the time we're in the red zone, realize we've become the threat. We're as much of the threat as anything. And so it's going to be hard for them to remember us as anything other than threatening.
Jess again. You've just watched Teepa talk about key elements of risk assessment. Of course, there's much to consider in terms of the person, their history, the environment, etc. But we also have to consider, what are we weighing here? Because where and how a person lives is significantly impacted by their level of mobility. So it's really much more than just looking at falls or injuries. We're really looking at quality of life for the person. If we're just trying to prevent falls and not also looking at, are restrictions impacting quality of life? We've got to be really mindful of that piece. We tend to really want them to change, what's happening with them to change, but we need to change. We need to change what we do and adapt. We've got to be creative with technology and our resources in order to get some different results. We've got to get into responsive mode. Well, what does that mean? Instead of our common, where's your walker? No, stay there. I'm going to go get your walker. Wait. Instead, John, hey, you're up. Ooh, this hand under hand thing maybe. And then come with me. We'll get your walker together. I might not tell him that, but that's my plan. Instead of, no, ooh, cool, let's do this together, because in this moment, I've got to work with you. I've got to work with what you've got. So we've also got to recognize what's driving this. What's going on for that person? Now, are there some staff who've picked up that when John starts to get really moving or restless in his chair, they've noticed, usually that either means, he's got to go to the bathroom, or, he gets cold. And so one of those two things tends to be what's going on with that restlessness. And so when we meet that need, all of a sudden he settles again. Or maybe it's an energy thing and he's not used to sitting in the chair for such long periods. He's used to up and going. And so he's got all this energy that needs to be expended. So a nice walk, and maybe that meets his need. Or he's overtired, but he doesn't know it. And so, again, we've got to get skilled at assessing what's the underlying need. And we've got to get skilled at meeting those needs early, picking up on those cues early, and doing what we can in order to prevent things from escalating to where now they're really in a state, and that puts us in a state, and we're much more likely to do this. They see us as a threat, we see them as a threat, the situation is risky or dangerous. If we can meet it early on, we can avoid some of that escalation. So part of this whole assessment of risk is, how do we get and stay on top of this and be proactive for ourselves and for the people we're working with? Thanks for sticking out this chapter. We'll see you in the next one.
What I do want us to do, though, is look at the gem states. And I want you to look at mobility hazards by gem. And I want you to read through them. I'm going to give you a second to read through them. And then I'm going to show you a video clip of a couple people. And we're going to look and see if we can tell what the hazard is, what the mobility hazard, the movement hazard. I'll give you a few more minutes. And then I'll read through it with some emphasis. So I'm allowing visual regard first. So when we're in a sapphire state, the older we get, the slower our reflexes, and the more we're going to have oops moments, where we mistake what we thought we could do with what actually is happening in that moment. Because if I haven't challenged myself for a while, then sometimes the challenge is a little more than I anticipated. So it is very common for us as we age to scrape and bump and bruise and injure ourselves in a way we would never have done when we were younger. So this one, it's like, okay, what did I learn? I learned I'm not as quick as I thought. So what are my two options? Get stronger and quicker, or give up. And way too often what happens is people get more cautious rather than taking the bulls by the horns and saying, you know what I need? I'm going to take a yoga class. I'm going to do Tai Chi. What I'm going to do is actually take something that gets me to get back into a movement pattern where I'm doing things more routinely, quicker, more speedily. What's one that you can start with pretty quick and actually gets really fast results? Dancing with a partner. So one of the things we should be doing as we get older is rhythmic movement. That's quick and responsive, because the more we do it, the better we sustain what we have. And people think you sustain things without trying to do something, and the answer is no. We should be involved in daily exercise, all kinds. And that's not somebody living with dementia. That's those of us who are trying to support people who are living with dementia. Because if we don't tune up our skills, we're not going to be in a good position to help people. If I'm going to use my body to help someone else's body, here's a heads up. I better get my body in shape. And one of the things we say is, yeah, but I have arthritis. It's like, yeah, people say that all the time. One of the best solutions for arthritis is strengthening. Strengthening exercise has been demonstrated more than anything else to reduce pain, but also improve mobility and reduce your risk of falls. So that's for people without dementia. Diamonds. What we know is that exercise program that matches your background, your preferences, and your beliefs are going to be a whole lot more helpful than ones that don't match you. So diamonds as a rule are going to under or overestimate their skills. They have limited learning of new skills and patterns. And one of the realities is diamonds start to fear falls. And when we start to fear falls as in diamond state, we reduce our ability to respond to a fall. We tend to react to a fall. And what happens is people spread out into two groups, those who start doing less and those who do things and continue to fall, but they don't have the middle ground, which is build your skills and build your skills with things that you tend to do well. So how many of you truly believe for the diamonds in your care, you optimize their mobility skills and their strength and their skills so that when they have that risk of fall, they're less at risk? And I'll tell you, if you're just using therapy services, the answer is not. And when people live with dementia, if they don't come to group activities, and the group activities are geared for everybody, we're actually not serving anyone well when it comes to mobility enhancement. We should have some programs that are more tuned into individuals and actually challenge people, whatever level you're at, let's see if we can't bump you up a little bit. Whatever level you're functioning at, let's see if we can't go that extra little bit. We don't get strong baselines, and we don't encourage people to go beyond their baseline or even sustain their baseline, because we don't even have these kind of baselines. So we get more curious about what people think, what they're doing. And so one of the real simple things is there's a screening tool that uses rotational movements. It uses up and out reach. It actually uses some sit to stand, some turn on a dime things. Those are great tools, and it's called the Get Up and Go is one. It's by Tonetti. And there's another one is Stand and Reach. So it's that ability to have standing balance, reach, and not fall. So those are kinds of things we should be thinking about for diamond. But if I've never exercised, then you better figure out how to disguise exercise as something I'm interested in doing. Emeralds are people who are going to forget their devices, they're going to skip steps, they're going to resent controller interference, and they have emotional reactions to things. So if that's the case, then we will build into their day and rearrange stable supports in their environment. And we need to use more people to interact with people who are emeralds, not devices. We want to create spaces that have stability and places to hold on to. And then we've got to build people into the day that know how to be supportive and not correctional. So these are folks, for instance, that this is a group that actually a blue line of tape leading bathroom is not a bad strategy, because what will happen is I get used to following the blue line, and then I can find the bathroom when I get out of bed. It's a straight line shot, and what you do is you make sure you put supports on either side of that straight line shot, and I'm much more likely to get to and from the bathroom without a fall, because I actually have something stable to hold on to. And then if you have your pre-device that warns people I'm about to get up, then somebody's getting up with me when I'm getting up, and they're doing that kind of thing that's going to make sense. Ambers are folks that are typically exploring without caution. They're seeking or avoiding stimulation they don't like. They're avoiding or seeking pain. Now, that's weird. What did I just say? They're avoiding or seeking pain. Well, when you're an amber, sometimes something is better than nothing. And you'd think I'd avoid pain, but I won't necessarily. I'll actually seek an interaction, even if it's painful, because some interaction is better than none at all. And that's why many ambers enter the space of somebody who doesn't like them, because at least I'm getting something. And what happens is that person doesn't like me. And that puts me at high risk for a fall. And it also puts me at high risk for resident to resident aggression. But I don't care because I'm bored. And so I want something. And even though that something is a little more than I bargained for, it's better than nothing. And the people who will do that the most are your high risk takers. So what we need to do is create safer spaces and places to explore based on my sensory need and what I'm looking for, and seating that matches my desires. Surfaces matter for people who are ambers. And I've got to have surfaces that I work with, surfaces that I sit on, surfaces that I stand on. So we've got to create some spaces that are different. One of the things we're looking at for ambers is, would they do better with forearm walkers? Now, forearm walkers are walkers that have forearm supports so that when you bend your elbow, you can hold on to it with your hand, and when you're moving forward, move that walker around. The challenge is I still have to have somebody hand me that walker and help me stand tall. But once I do that, it turns out people using forearm walkers keep the walker closer to themselves and actually stand more upright and keep their weight over their base of support, particularly when we add oh do 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 do. If we use marching music, people will tend to stand upright more and move forward more. Now, that doesn't mean I have to have the music on. It means whoever's coming up knows me, knows what I like to listen to, knows what kind of marching music at what volume, at what frequency, at what intensity, at what speed is going to work for me. And the same when we talk about rubies, transitions, really, we have to take more time doing things. And pearls, how do we use movement when they don't have movement? So, Corey, could you go ahead and show, I'm going to stop sharing. I want you to show at least one clip. And what we'll do is we'll work our way through it, because I want you to see an interaction where somebody, all the people you're about to see have super high fall risk ratings, and all the people you are about to see have had a previous fall. I'm thinking, I'll double check. I believe all of them have had a previous fall that resulted in a hip fracture repair. So they've already demonstrated, not only are they high risk fallers, they're high risk injury fallers.
Teepa, are you okay to start with Stanley?
Yeah. Stanley's a great example.
Okay.
So Stanley, people have tried to get Stanley out of bed. So you're going to see me work with Stanley getting up. And I want you to watch, what you're watching here are the mobility elements to it and how I'm using mobility skills of my own to help Stanley.
Now, using the positive physical approach is really critical when someone is asleep. Stanley? Stanley?
Yeah.
Hey,
Hey,
good morning.
good morning.
It's Teepa.
What?
Teepa.
Teepa.
Yes, sir. How you doing?
You all right?
You doing all right?
Yeah, I'll leave you.
Yeah. You about ready to get up?
Well,
You could. All right. All right. Ooh, that's a cough you got going there. Yeah. Tell you what, let's pull the covers down. All right. You gonna help me?
Yep.
Help me out here. Pull these covers down. That's it. Good. Pull them on down. That's it. Excellent. Now, roll to me.
Roll.
Roll over this way. Yeah. Come on over this way. There you go. Excellent. Well, now there. You're looking good. Can I turn the light on?
You want to?
Well, let me do that. I think that'll make it a little easier. Stanley is someone who has the potential to have lots of trouble getting started in the morning. Oh. Using the positive physical approach makes a huge difference in how the day will go. How you doing?
It's pretty good.
Doing pretty good? You had quite a cough there.
Man,
You had quite a cough.
yeah,
Yeah. How about we get up and go to the bathroom,
well,
and then we'll get you dressed. How's that?
that's what you want to do. That's what we'll do.
Well, let's go do it. Okay? Put your feet down and let's stand up and come with me. All right. Let's go here.
Okay, so what I want folks to do is tell me what you noticed about him mobility-wise. What did you notice? Is he somebody who's going to try to get up on his own when he decides to get up on his own? Is he somebody who knows whether he's safe?
Gonna move if he wants to, but mostly doesn't move.
Yeah, unless he has a need to get up, he's not going to get up. Is he going to get up because people tell him to get up?
Maybe depending on how they say it.
Was I able to help him get up?
Yeah.
Was it just Stanley? Come on, let's get up. I have breakfast for you.
No, you're slow to warm them up.
So I had to get him to what? Like me. Because the reason he's getting up doesn't have anything to do with getting up. He likes me. And that's why he's doing it. So what was the first big movement I had Stanley make? What was the very first movement I had him make? Nope. Turn his head to me. He had to turn his head compared to his whole body. Did you notice he turned and looked at me with his head and he didn't move his whole body? He just moved his head. Ma'am. That was the very first one. Ma'am. What was the next movement? Nope. I had him take my hand. So the next thing was get connected to me because he's been known to hit people. He's whacked them. He already scratched somebody earlier that day. 2 people went in to get him up and they had what they called resistance to care. And so they had already spent 20 minutes with him back in the bed. He had never gotten out of the bed. They'd tried to get him up and he fought them. And they had an incident report to fill out and they had wasted 40 minutes of staff care time. He was still in bed. He was still drenched. He still was not doing anything. So I switched it up. So I came in and got permission. I got permission. And then who pulled the covers down? Now we get to the thing next. Who's going to control? Stanley. I said, can you pull the covers down? There you go. You got it. You got it. And then he folded his legs up. And then who actually got himself up on the side of the bed? He didn't. He didn't get rolled to me, but he did get that I wanted him to sit up. And he got up. And then what? What did I do then? That was a little tricky. I'm sneaky. Guess what I wanted him to do for a couple seconds because he had been supine and he was sitting. I wanted him to sit there for a few seconds so that his blood pressure stabilized. So that when we went to a stand, he wasn't going to be high risk. So what I said is, I'll cut the light on, I'll be right back. But I didn't say I'll be right back. I just said I'm going to cut the light on so we can see. And Stanley watched me go over and back while he's stabilizing himself. Notice what's he using his arms for? He doesn't have sitting balance. He's using his hands to support himself. And then as he gets his sitting balance, he reaches up and then the hand goes back down. He's not all that stable. And then I come back and give him a few more seconds. And how did I get him to then do the next thing? What was the next instruction? Put your feet down. Because guess what he had done? Guess what he was doing? He was holding himself up, his arms and his trunk. His feet were not all the way on the ground because the bed's up just high enough that his feet weren't all the way down. So put your feet down. He had them way out in front of himself. If he had tried to stand up at that point, he'd be doing a whole bunch of rocking. So instead, put your feet down. He pulled him back, and then I stood up and showed him what I was looking for, and then he followed my lead. So what people don't realize is how many pieces of data I broke that task down in till Stanley was safely getting up. How much resistance did I get? And actually what surprised everybody is Stanley went into that bathroom and even though his brief was drenched, he sat on the pot and peed again. All because of the responsive cues I was using that helped Stanley be more functionally mobile. He then brushed his 2 little teeth that he has. He has a few of them. Most of them are fake. And then he got back up again. He helped me get his shirt on. All those things were happening because of the sequence I was cueing in. So he's actually very mobile. He then mostly dresses himself with just few cues for me. And he comes sit to stand and he leans over and he does his shoe. I could rob him of a lot of those opportunities by taking over and supporting him too much. What I did is I got right up underneath and I supported. So I'm actually sustaining and gaining his mobility. And so he's an example of what gem state do you think? If you have to guess, he has no idea what the next thing is we're going to do. He doesn't know. If he doesn't like it, he's not going to do it. If he does like it, he will. What's he all about? Sensation. So he's a nice, strong amber. He's a lovely amber. He's in an amber state. He's at very high risk for falls and for resistance to care. But he's also at high risk for us robbing him of abilities that he doesn't need to miss. And once we do that and we're gone, they aren't going to come back. So that's unfortunate. So if we don't support Stanley the right way, we'll actually push him further over toward another fall and toward more fall-related injuries because the more we rob him of, he's still seeking. He just doesn't know the safe way to do that. So Corey, how about pulling one other one up? Because we have a few more minutes and I'm going to open it up for questions.
Hi, it's Teepa, and today we're talking about helping people get in and out of cars so you can go places, do things. Because life doesn't stop when you get dementia. Even in the later stages, you may want to go somewhere. And so what I want to do is talk about how to help this happen instead of make it almost impossible by virtue of how we try to help. One of the things to think about when you're helping someone get in the car, if they've always been the driver, you're actually asking them to reverse every movement in all the sequences in order to do it, because getting in on that side is real different than getting in on this side. You have to turn your body the opposite way, you have to do your feet the opposite way, and when you get in there, you even have to put the seatbelt on the opposite way. So it's not as easy as you think when you're already having trouble with initiating, sequencing, and finishing something, and then moving on to the next step. Additionally, when we get in cars, it's not uncommon with low cars for us to sit down first and then turn and put our feet in. The problem is, to do this, I have to understand that I'm going to need to sit back and down. And in order to do that, I've actually got to lean way far forward so my butt will go far enough on the seat that when I go to do this, I can put my foot. Now, look at the amount of flexion I have to do here and the balance I have to have. So one of the things you can do that makes it a little easier is have the person hold on right here, because you can hold the door at whatever angle is needed so that I feel stable, and when I sit down, I'm holding on to something as I sit, if I can't figure that out, rather than saying the word sit down, mom, just sit down. Doesn't inspire me to want to come with you or do what you want me to do. Additionally, something to think about before you get started is to put down a pillowcase or a towel, so that when I get here, you can in fact use the towel.
So, oops, thanks, Corey. So let's go back to the full screen here. So I'm curious as people are watching this video, what does this say to you as opposed to what we tend to do with trying to get people in and out of cars? What are you noticing? Am I saying you get to a place where you just don't want to do this anymore? What's the point of what we're doing in all these videos? And you could look at one after the other after the other. What's the point of what we're doing in all of them?
To simplify and break down.
Yeah, so that I'm doing the modification. The person is not modifying their abilities. I'm using their abilities to modify how I ask what I'm asking them to do.
Hey, Jess again. You've gotten through chapter 4, Mobility Hazards by Gem State and Teepa supporting Stanley. So Teepa touched on each gem state in terms of mobility. And what is it we should take away? Well, for sapphires, we're really looking at proactive movement. We really want to maintain the mobility that we have. For diamonds, we may need to disguise our exercises in terms of fun activities or something else, depending on the person's preferences. But for sapphires and diamonds, we may be thinking about things like Tai Chi and dancing, for other gem states as well. But when we're talking about emerald state, we're now really starting to look at environmental stability and structure, providing places to hold on to, visuals to follow, really being more guided and discerning in our setup for folks. Looking at amber state, we're really talking about creating safe places and spaces to explore, where the typical social rules maybe are more friendly and forgiving. And the person's really able to roam and explore as they feel. For rubies, we're really emphasizing the idea of using music and rhythm, especially tapping into that automatic rhythmic movement. 1, 2, 3, or the idea of marching sounds, etc., etc. We also want to give plenty of time, allowing lots of transition time, and really being patient as we wait for people to fully process and do. And with pearls, increasing our ability to use our body to provide physical guidance in a way that's truly supportive can absolutely make a world of difference. Now, when we looked at Teepa with Stanley, what did you notice about her? Her physical approach, the way she connected with him, her likability. How did she get things started? And what did you notice about her doing for or with or to? What Teepa did with Stanley, feel free to take a picture of the screen here. If you're not super familiar, most people will be very familiar with the steps of our positive physical approach. This is geared towards emerald state and us approaching someone who's living with dementia, or really anybody. Basically what we do is we adapt our approaches based on this model. So Teepa adapted for someone who was more in an amber state, who was lying down and asleep. But she followed this as a guide and adapted from there. We have skilled adaptations for all sorts of different scenarios. When it comes to the words that she used and how she said things, go ahead and snap a picture of this if you don't have it. These are our positive personal connections, 5 ways to get people to like us. Teepa said it was really important that he liked her. So how do we get connected so that they know we're coming, want us there, and how do we get them to want to work with us? Well, that would be in those positive action starters, how we initiate the doing. So Teepa really kept things short and simple and broke it down into small steps that Stanley was able to manage. Well, it turns out when we're really dialed in to these abilities of the different gem states, we're really better able to adapt and adjust our support just right. So, with the right setting and the right care, all gems can shine.
I want to preserve mobility. I want to enhance mobility. I want people to do as much as they can do for as long as they can do it. And I want it to be, do this with your fingers. This is what people have a hard time. Do this right up to the screen. I want it to be a little risky. I want to get you to be okay with a little bit of risk, not like massive risk. But if you get too scared of risk, what that means is you'll start pulling away from risk. And what I want you to realize is a little risk is a healthy thing. Doing things that are a little on the edge is a good idea, as long as I have the support in place. So when I get to a ruby state, I'm going to put things on the floor and encourage people to pick them up. I'm going to be in the right place to support that movement. But if I don't get people to do it, I'm actually increasing the risk that they're going to have a fall-related injury. The more I can get people to stoop and recover, to bend and recover, to reach down, and to use that other hand as a support hand, the more I'm buying them time and the better I'm building the core so that they have a longer period of time of being mobile. We have so long in our history tried to modify things so people aren't at risk. The problem is people are always going to be at risk. How can we minimize the risk, not eliminate it? How do we create the just right support so people get a little challenged? And the challenge is a healthy, interesting challenge, not a dangerous, uncertain challenge for both of us. And that means our skills need to come up. I need to learn that a better strategy for somebody in Amber State or Ruby State or Emerald State is to have them do sidestepping rather than having them do 25 yards down the hall, because sidestepping actually is weight shifting. And when I shift to the side, that's what walking is. You shift from one side to the other. But if I'm not doing single foot stance, and the reason I do it facing the wall, and I put pictures up high or the ABCs, that encourages a person to go this way, this way, this way, this way. And then I'll do dancing with a partner, because both of those get a person more upright and more able to move side to side with rhythm and more willing to turn the body. And those are the things that are going to keep people from falling. Added to which, sit to stand is the most important movement, not getting up and then being dragged around. So when people follow the rules, who needs to figure out the rules they're living by and start supporting them as they are, where they are. And we need to quit asking them to do what they can't do. Look in the mirror, it's us. And so we've got to build these new strategies. We've got to quit using devices and systems that don't work, because we're never going to fix dementia if that's what we're doing. We need to fix what we can fix, which is us. So thanks everybody for being here. I hope I at least got you thinking.
Well, thank you for joining us on this webinar about mobility support. Teepa asked in this last chapter, what's the point? So the point is to enable people to do as much as they can for as long as they can. Whatever video she shows, really, it's about adapting to their abilities. Who needs to change? We do. Teepa said, I'm doing the modifying. They aren't changing their abilities. I'm using their abilities to modify how I ask and what I'm asking them to do. So, in order for us to change so that we can better support people, some other opportunities: streaming online. So you can check out our Facebook page. Teepa does daily videos at 8 a.m. and we've got our Live at 5 run by the PAC team, which you can also view that on YouTube. Our YouTube channel actually does have a lot of those little mobility support clips and other skill building clips as well. You can also visit our website to stream DVDs and to stream previously recorded webinars. There's a Care Partner support series accessible from our webpage, teepasnow.com, for care partners. Now, many of you who are really serious and committed about building skills and maybe even helping other people to build skills may want to check out our 2-hour champion courses. There are 4 levels, really breaks down skills, really focused on building skills. And of course, certifications are as well with a whole new level. Building our awareness, knowledge, and skills until we become really competent, well, that's how we're able to make a difference. Thank you so much. Take care.